There and back again. A Goggins Tale. Part 15. The Voice of Saruman. The company approached Isengard slowly, their horses navigating the treacherous waterlogged terrain. The once proud stronghold now lay a vast flooded basin, the waters rippling around them as they passed. The skeletal remains of great machines of war jutted out of the water around them. Boromir steadied his horse as it almost lost footing on a loose slab of stone. "Careful," he called to the others in alarm, his voice carrying over the uneasy silence. "This is no place for horses, or dwarves," Gimli grumbled, gripping Legolas tightly as they rode together. "The sooner we're done here, the better." Gandalf gestured for the others to follow. They maneuvered their way carefully across the standing water until they reached the base of Orthanc. The tower's smooth black stone rose sheer and unyielding, a monument to the skill and craft of old. At its base lay a wide staircase leading up to a pair of iron doors. Above the doors, a high balcony jutted out, framed by ornate carvings. The company dismounted, tension hanging thick as they faced the stairs. Gandalf stepped forward, his staff in hand. The wind tugged at his robes as he raised his voice. "Saruman," he called, his voice loud and commanding. "Come forth." The words echoed off the tower's smooth surface, but no reply came. The silence felt oppressive, the stillness of the flooded land broken only by the faint drip of water from the ruins around them. "Saruman," Gandalf called again, his voice ringing louder. "It is I, Gandalf, who you betrayed, and your neighbor to whom you have caused great injury. Come forth." There was a long pause. Just as the company began to shift uneasily in doubt, a soft, melodious voice floated down from the balcony above. "Who calls upon me?" it asked, gentle and smooth, with no trace of malice. Gandalf's grip tightened on his staff. "Saruman, do not play coy. You know well who I am. I have come to speak with you, though you deserve neither parley nor pardon." The voice laughed lightly, giving a warmth as if it were the gentle chuckle of a dear companion. "Ah, Gandalf, my old friend, how strange it is to hear your voice here, in this place." A figure emerged onto the balcony, his robes catching the dim light. Saruman stood tall, his hands resting on the stone railing, his expression calm and smiling. "Betrayal, you say?" Saruman mused, his tone almost wistful. "But tell me, my old friend, was it not you who turned against me first?" "You twist the truth as ever," Gandalf replied, his voice steady but strained. "You betrayed all that we stood for. Your lust for power has brought ruin upon these lands. Look below you at what remains of your schemes." Saruman spread his arms as if to embrace the scene. "Is it not magnificent? The strength of will and the shaping of the world. These are the marks of true power, Gandalf. Yet I am no tyrant. Come, let us not quarrel. There is still much we might achieve together." The sound of his voice was entrancing, like the gentle rush of a stream. Aragorn felt his hand waver on the hilt of his sword, and Legolas blinked as if in a daze. "Enough of your games, Saruman," Gandalf said, though his voice seemed to falter. His hand trembled slightly as he leaned on his staff. "We have not come to bandy words with you. Your power is broken." "Is it?" Saruman's tone remained light, almost pitying. "Ah, Gandalf, you were always so certain, so righteous. But the world is not so simple. Come, let us reason together. Cast aside your suspicions and hear me out." The company stood frozen, their minds caught in the web of Saruman's words. His voice wove around them, planting seeds of doubt and stirring faint desires. Gandalf's voice faltered briefly, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his staff. Even he, clad in white, felt the subtle pull of his old friend's words. It was Gimli who took a step forward and broke the silence. The words of this wizard stand on their heads. "In the language of Orthanc, help means ruin, and saving means slaying. That is plain, but we did not come here to beg." At Gimli's words, the spell seemed to waver. Aragorn straightened, his gaze sharpening as if the fog had lifted. "Peace," said Saruman, and for a fleeting moment, his voice was less suave, and a light flickered in his eyes and was gone. "I do not speak to you yet, Gimli Glowing's son," he said. "Far away is your home, and small concern of yours are the troubles of this land. But it was not by design of your own that you became embroiled in them, and so I will not blame such part as you have played. A valiant one, I doubt not. But I pray you, allow me first to speak with the King of Rohan, my neighbor, and once my friend. What have you to say, Theoden King? Will you have peace with me, and all the aid that my knowledge founded in long years can bring? Shall we make our counsels together against evil days, and repair our injuries with such goodwill that our estate shall both come to fairer flower than ever before?" Still, Theoden did not answer. Whether he strove with anger or doubt, none could say. The air around the company grew heavy, as Saruman's smooth words echoed from the balcony above. Tension rippled through the group, and just as Gandalf began to reply, Goggins snapped. His voice boomed like a thunderclap, cutting through the wizard's enchantment. "I seen this shit before in the Marines," Goggins roared, jabbing a finger upward. "This motherfucker's manipulating you bitches." Saruman paused mid-sentence, his expression shifting from smooth disdain to amused incredulity. "And who," he asked with exaggerated politeness, "is this shining example of mortal wisdom? A being of such unparalleled insight that he interrupts the counsels of the wise, without hair upon head to shield thoughts as dark as complexion?" Goggins' nostrils flared as he stepped forward. "Name's Goggins, motherfucker, and I ain't fucking around with your bitch-ass games. Keep talking your shit, and I'ma drag your ass off that balcony and drown it in this swamp myself." Saruman's lips curved into a sardonic smile. "Ah, I see. A creature of limited intellect but loud voice. Tell me, what foul mother spat forth such a vile brute?" He gave a mock sigh, shaking his head. "Don't make me come up there, motherfucker." Goggins fumed, taking a step toward the staircase. Now, let's not have a scene," Saruman replied, waving his hand dismissively. "I'd hate for the halflings to see their dark guardian make a fool of himself. Speaking of which," he added, his gaze shifting around, "where is Grima?" "Dead," Gandalf replied bluntly, his tone as sharp as his glare. "Crucified for his treachery." Saruman raised his eyebrows, attempting to mask his surprise. "Ah, a pity. I had expected the nobles amongst you to show poor Grima mercy." His gaze lingered on the king, his disdain evident. "Calm down, Saruman," Gandalf commanded. "Renounce your folly and the path you have chosen. There is yet a chance for you to find redemption. Aid us now, and you may still have a place in the world to come." Saruman laughed, the sound rich and mocking. "Aid you? Aid you?" He leaned over the railing, his robes billowing. "Do you think me a fool, Gandalf? That I would debase myself to crawl at the feet of lesser beings? Look at you. Dwarves, men, halflings, and," his gaze flicked to Goggins. "Whatever that is," Goggins snarled, cracking his knuckles. Saruman's expression hardened, his voice dripping with contempt. "Think you that I cannot see through this, black demon you have brought to my doorstep? Nay, I will not bow to you, Gandalf, nor to your pathetic rabble. Go back to your crumbling kingdoms and leave me to my work." The air grew still, and Gandalf's face darkened. "Then you leave us no choice," he said quietly. Above them, a faint movement drew their attention. High above the balcony, clinging to the sheer walls of Orthanc, was a figure, small, wiry, and moving with unnatural ease. "Is that Gollum?" whispered Aragorn in disbelief. The creature climbed slowly but surely, his bony fingers finding the tiniest crevices in the otherwise smooth surface. Despite the near impossibility of the ascent, Gollum moved with a twisted grace. On the balcony, Saruman continued his tirade, gesturing imperiously to the company below. His voice carried, full of scorn and disdain. Yet a faint scraping noise drew his attention. He paused mid-sentence, his sharp eyes narrowing as his head began to tilt upward. Thunk! A stone struck the balcony railing with a sharp crack. Saruman flinched, his gaze snapping downward. "What trickery is this?" he demanded, his composure briefly faltering. "Fuck you," shouted Goggins, picking up another rock. "You keep talking your shit, motherfucker." Another stone arced through the air, grazing Saruman's beard. "Impudent fool," Saruman thundered, his staff crackling. "You dare mock me?" But had the distraction served its purpose? High above, Gollum had managed to slip through an open window, vanishing into the shadowed interior of the tower. The group below stood tense, their eyes locked on the iron doors. Moments stretched into what felt like hours, and then, with a soft clink, the doors creaked open. Saruman froze, his hand outstretched mid-gesture. His face drained of color, his rage replaced with a look of horror. "How?" he mumbled, his voice trembling in confusion. The group wasted no time. Gandalf raised his staff and led the charge. The company surged forward, their footsteps echoing against the cold stone. Saruman's shock turned to fury. "You dare!" he roared, reaching over to the edge of the balcony. With a flick of his staff, he sent shards of stone and twisted metal hurtling down at the intruders. Goggins ducked a flying shard. His hand went to his belt, pulling his non-lethal option and taking swift aim at the wizard above. "Motherfucker," he muttered, raising the taser. A faint click, and the barbs launched upward, striking Saruman squarely in the chest. The wizard convulsed with a strangled cry, his staff clattering to the ground as he crumpled against the railing. The balcony went still. Inside Orthanc, Gollum stood triumphantly by the open doors. His grin stretched wide as he looked to the company. Smeagol helped the master. Yes. Clever Smeagol did it. Gandalf gave a rare smile, inclining his head in approval before rushing up a narrow set of stairs, followed swiftly by Aragorn, who nodded in acknowledgement as he passed. Even Gimli, reluctant as ever, grumbled in appreciation. "It was well done, you little rascal." Last through the door was Goggins, holstering his spent taser. "Excellent work, soldier," he shouted. "Man, if only I had a soldier like you in Iraq climbing up walls and shit." "Smeagol always helps the master," said Gollum excitedly, enjoying the praise and recognition. They followed the others up the winding stairs. They were met with an air of foreboding. The inside of the tower sat in stark contrast to the flooded ruins outside. The walls were formed of the same smooth black stone as the exterior, but within they gleamed fresh, having not been exposed to the elements outside. The air smelled of old parchment and ash. Along the walls, tall shelves brimming with ancient tomes and scrolls reached dizzying heights, ladders standing idly against them. Strange instruments, mechanisms of brass and crystal, their purposes a mystery to the company, were scattered across heavy tables. In the center of the chamber, a large pedestal held an orb that seemed to pulse faintly with a dark reddish glow. The room felt alive with a low hum, as though the very walls vibrated with the remnants of spells long cast. Saruman lay slumped against the cold stone floor, his once pristine robes now soiled and tattered. His staff lay a few feet away. Goggins approached cautiously alongside Gandalf, Aragorn, and the king. He gave him a not-so-gentle nudge with the tip of his boot, causing the old wizard to twitch and then stir, opening his eyes in surprise as his senses returned to him. "What sorcery is this?" his voice rasped. Goggins smirked. "You thought you were hard. Not hard enough to deal with 50,000 volts." Beside him, Gandalf, his expression grim, bent down and retrieved Saruman's staff with an air of finality. "This," Gandalf said, holding the staff aloft, "is no longer yours. You have forfeited your claim to any semblance of power or authority, Saruman." As Gandalf finished berating Saruman for his treachery, The wizard's once proud visage was now a mix of anger and humiliation. Focus now turned to the king who confronted his neighbor for the unjust treatment of his people. "I would have you hang," he spat at Saruman, his face contorted in pain. Unnoticed in the corner of the room, Pippin's eyes were drawn to the faint, pulsing glow of the palantir resting on the pedestal. Its light seemed to beckon him, whispering words he couldn't quite make out. As though in a trance, he stepped closer and reached out, his small hands trembling. The moment his fingers brushed the surface of the orb, it flared to life, its dark glow turning to a blazing fire. Pippin let out a strangled cry of pain, clutching the palantir as though it were fused to his hands. His body writhed, and his cries grew louder, but the others, engrossed in their confrontation with Saruman, failed to notice. Goggins, standing off to the side, caught the flicker of the fiery light in the corner of his eye. He turned sharply, his instincts kicking in. "What the fuck is going on now?" he muttered, striding over to Pippin. The hobbit's face was contorted in agony, his mouth moving wordlessly. Without hesitation, Goggins grabbed the orb from Pippin's hands. The moment he did, he felt an intense pull, like a tidal wave crashing into his mind. Before him, the fiery orb transformed into an oppressive void. In its center, a towering figure cloaked in shadow loomed. A cruel, disembodied voice filled his head. "Tell Saruman," it hissed. "This dainty is not for him." Goggins blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Who the fuck is this?" he asked aloud in confusion and impatience. The voice chuckled, a low, malicious sound. "Foolish mortal. You dare speak to me with such insolence?" The presence pressed down harder, a crushing weight of malevolence attempting to overwhelm him. Pain coursed through Goggins' mind, but he gritted his teeth in defiance. "Fuck you," he growled. Goggins closed his eyes and focused. "This stone's like a phone," he thought. "You send shit my way, but maybe I'll send some back." He thought about the pain, the physical torment he'd endured in his life, running 100 miles on broken legs, pissing blood, shitting himself, and pushing through agony that would break any other man. He focused on those moments and the pain and threw and back at whoever was on the other side. "What are you doing?" the voice shrieked. "I'ma take your fucking soul," Goggins growled menacingly. The shadowy figure convulsed, its cries growing louder and more desperate. "Enough!" it bellowed, but Goggins wasn't finished. From the void, a wail of pain and horror erupted, the dark figure recoiling as though burned. The fiery glow of the orb dimmed, and then all was silent. Goggins staggered back, clutching the palantir, his chest heaving, drenched in sweat. The orb was now cold and inert in his hands. Gandalf rushed to his side, his face pale with fear. "David, what happened? What did you see?" the wizard asked, his voice urgent. "Satanic shit," replied Goggins, wiping sweat from his brow. "They were fucking about around a white tree. Some guy tried to touch me, so I fucked him up good, showed him how hard a real man is, and he shit himself." Gandalf's eyes widened as he placed a hand on Goggins' head, his expression one of concentration. Instantly, he withdrew it as though burned. "All of Mordor will be quaking," Gandalf whispered, his voice full of awe. "We must hurry. There is no time to waste." The room fell into tense silence, broken only by Pippin's faint groan as he stirred, but none paid him any attention. Goggins handed the palantir to Gandalf, his hand steady despite the ordeal. Gandalf gathered the company for an urgent council. They had seen a glimpse of the enemy's plans, and now the race was on to stop them. "The enemy marshals his forces to strike at the heart of Gondor," said Gandalf, his voice grave. "His hammer blow will fall hardest upon Minas Tirith, and we must hasten there without delay. I shall take the halfling Pippin and Lord Goggins with me. The rest of you must follow once the full strength of Rohan has been gathered." "We must first deal with the wizard," Aragorn interjected in concern. "He cannot be left to roam free, sowing mischief unchecked." Gandalf turned to Saruman, who yet remained on the cold floor. I offer you one final chance. Renounce your schemes and lend us your aid, or endure the judgment of Lord Goggins. Should you choose the path of redemption, your staff will be returned, and you shall accompany me to Minas Tirith. Decide swiftly. Saruman hesitated for a long moment, his sharp eyes darting between the company. His once proud expression softened, and he bowed his head in what seemed like genuine contrition. I have allowed greed and darkness to corrupt my spirit. If given the chance, I would balance the scale and repay my neighbor for the harm I have caused. The company exchanged uneasy glances, their faces a mix of suspicion and disbelief. Gimli shifted his axe slightly, muttering something under his breath. Aragorn's gaze was hard, unyielding as he studied Saruman's face, searching for a sign of deceit. Even Theoden's knuckles tightened around the hilt of his sword. It was Gandalf who finally broke the silence. His piercing eyes seemed to look straight into Saruman's soul. "He is sincere," the wizard declared calmly. Without hesitation, Gandalf reached down and handed Saruman his staff. Taking it, his gaze turned towards Theoden. "King," he began, his voice subdued, "I would beg pardon for my actions which have caused considerable harm to you and your people. If you will allow it, I would renew the bond of friendship between our lands." Theoden stepped forward, his face grim, his posture stiff with righteous anger. "Were it not for the words of Gandalf, I would see you hang for your crimes against my people," he said, his voice like the steel of his blade, sharp and cold. "Yet, if we are to stand against the forces of Mordor, then all powers must be united. I will give you the chance to repair some of the damage you have done. But know this, my forgiveness will be earned, not given freely." Saruman nodded. "You will find no falsehood in my resolve, King of Rohan," he replied quietly. Gandalf extended a hand toward the fallen wizard, helping him to his feet. "Welcome to the Fellowship, Saruman the Grey."
Thanks for joining us on this adventure. If you enjoyed the journey and are eager for more wild fan fiction, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your fellow fans, and subscribe for more episodes. And if you're as enchanted by the idea of Middle-earth meeting Hogwarts as we are, make sure to check out our series exploring this magical crossover. Your support brings these worlds to life. Until next time, keep the fantasy alive.